Yes, Mr. Chair. Miss Allard? Okay, Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar? Okay. Miss Kennedy? I do see Crystal in the list, so we can come back to her. Miss LaFrance? Mr. Perez Verdilla?
He did text me that he is here.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Peterson?
I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Miss Quinn Davidson?
Here.
Mr. Rivera is here. Mr. Weddleton? Mr. Weddleton? Okay, Miss Zolotel?
Here.
Okay, I'm going to go back. I do see Miss Allard. Miss Allard, are you with us? Okay, what about Miss Kennedy?
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Kennedy. All right, Mr. Chair, it looks like you're missing Miss Allard verbally, but I do believe she is in the queue. Mr. Dunbar and Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, thank you. So I believe we have Miss Ward and Mr. Schutte to present on this one. Miss Allard just texted me that she is here. So whoever's gonna start, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you. This is Chair Rivera and Assembly members. Also, welcome to our new Assembly. I'm Robin Ward. I'm the Real Estate Director. I'm the Executive Director of the Heritage Land Bank. We actually requested this work session to try and address some of the comments and questions that the public had on this ordinance. So I would like to go through the presentation and then open it up for questions. I do have Mr. Bob Owens from the legal department who will be online to answer questions regarding the deed restriction if you have legal questions on that. So this is the proposed exchange of the Tozier tract for an HLB parcel that is just south of Martin Luther King Boulevard, adjacent to the Far North Bicentennial Park. So we're going to go over the, we start out with the ordinance. We'll give you some information on the Tozier tract. We'll give you information on our parcel. It's HLB parcel 3076. The exchange economics we've done today, the activities, what we plan for pre-exchange activities, the conditions of the exchange, and then the execution plan. This is the ordinance and ordinance of authorizing the disposal of by a non-competitive property exchange of Heritage Land Bank parcel 3076, legally described as Tract 6 Tudor Municipal Campus. Next slide.
I see.
Next slide.
Miss Ward.
Hold on.
Hold on.
Apparently there's difficulty with the presentation. Several of the members and administration can't see the presentation.
Okay.
Let me share it a different way. Just one moment.
Through the chair, assembly members and staff, that was Shelley, my HLB land manager, who is
How about now?
presentation. Can everyone see it now?
I can
Weddleton
see it.
sees it.
Okay, got it.
Better?
Unless I hear otherwise,
ahead,
it looks
Shelley.
like folks can see it.
You might want to change the view to, there you go.
If you change the view to slideshow,
Should be changed.
it's not changing. Okay, that's all right. We're going to go forward. Okay, next slide.
Just really quickly, just to put it on the record. Yes, we did do a roll call, Mr. Dunbar. Go ahead, Ms. Ward.
Next slide, Shelley. Okay. The Alaska Sled Dog and Racing Association has owned this property that was deeded to them by patent in 1958. And they, their mission is to facilitate youth and adult mushing events. They maintain the dog mushing trails in the Far North Bicentennial Park. Next slide.
Is it not showing for you?
Can you advance to the next slide?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. This is the 9 acres. It started out as a 10-acre parcel by patent. There's been some acquisitions. So you can see where it's located along Tudor. It's a right in, right out, and it abuts to the Campbell. Actually, it's called Campbell Park, Park below. We ordered appraisals on both properties. This property, because it has no deed restrictions, even though it is PLI, Public Lands and Institutions zone, there are no deeds restrictions on this. So this is the appraisal value for fair market value that was determined on this parcel. Next slide. The Heritage Land Bank, our mission, we were established in 1972, and it is our mission to manage uncommitted municipal land in a manner designed to benefit present and future residents of Anchorage and to promote orderly development and achieve the goals of the comprehensive plan. This is the parcel that is being proposed to exchange with the Tozier tract. The parcel appraisal for this, because of the deed restriction, although it is also PLI, Public Lands and Institutions zoned, and larger, it's 10 acres larger, the deed restriction on it does diminish the value. So this is the value that was established by a third-party appraisal on the Heritage Land Bank parcel. Next slide. This was received from BLM through DNR in 1981. It's part of our large Campbell tract transfer that was a municipal entitlement. It does have patent restrictions. It has to align with the Far North Bicentennial Plan. The area was replatted when Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard was put through, so it was platted in 2011, and it created those tracts, which included this one, Tract 6. This is a copy or language from the deed restriction in the patent that provides that it has to be used for a use that's no use other than public parks and recreational purposes or other compatible public purposes, only in accordance with the plan for Far North Bicentennial Park that was established in September of 1974. What a reverter clause means is if this use is violated, the title of the property would revert back to the grantor, and in this case would be the state under the Department of Natural Resources. Next slide. When the property was platted, this is what the Tract 6 looks like on the actual plat. One thing that we wanted to point out is that there is right now a current what's called an IGP, intergovernmental permit, for a portion of the Tour of Anchorage Trail as it comes across Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. The new IGP that's being proposed then would connect to this IGP. Next slide. So the exchange would be the Tozier track, title to that, or the title to track 6 Tudor Municipal Campus, and the difference would be paid out of the HLB account. We have a sustainable account that we have funds available for the difference. Then HLB would take the Tozier track as into HLB. Whenever it was disposed or developed or whatever happens to it, if there are any proceeds, then it would repay back the HLB revenue account, our sustaining fund. So the activities today, we've done some initial due diligence on the property. Both sides have. We've negotiated a letter of intent to exchange the properties that has general terms and conditions of the exchange, including the subjects to the deed restriction and also what the economics would be. We did hold our first public hearing on this was held at HLB, which is a required activity before disposing property out of HLB. That was held on February 13th at a meeting at the HLB Advisory Commission, and proper notice was given and the property was posted at that time.
Ms. Ward, just really quick, want to note for the record that Ms. LaFrance is here. I believe she was here from the beginning. I think she just missed the roll call. Go ahead, Ms. Ward.
Thank you. So our pre-exchange activities, where we go next after we have authority for the disposal, we would begin working on a intergovernmental permit for the trail. The Tour of Anchorage Trail goes along the west side of this property. And the IGP would be placed on the property and recorded prior to any conveyance of the property. The reason that we use, next slide. The reason that we use intergovernmental permits, the MOA cannot be a grantor and a beneficiary on an easement. We cannot grant ourselves an easement. So the tool that we use is called an intergovernmental permit. They are recorded, and we make sure that it has the same language that a full permanent easement would have. It just doesn't say easement on it. And in the very last paragraph of all of our IGPs, we place language that states it is agreed that this intergovernmental use permit shall be converted to a public access easement in perpetuity, conveying the rights that are listed in there of the municipality if this property is ever conveyed to an owner other than the municipality. So to make sure that this actually converts to a full permanent easement, this language is placed in it, and then it is recorded. So by doing that, IGPs can convert to an easement whenever that conveyance actually does take place. So we will work on the IGP, and that will be recorded. Next, we will go into a full actual land exchange agreement. It will look like a purchase and sale agreement, but it's more of a land exchange agreement. That will be drafted, and then it will be reviewed and approved through the MOA legal department. It will then go to the ASDRA nonprofit board and their attorney on retainer. And then we would draft deeds at the same time. They will be appendix to that land exchange. So there would be deeds for both properties. The deed from the municipality to Tozier nonprofit to ASDRA would contain the deed restriction language, and that would also need to be approved by the Department of Natural Resources along with authority to transfer. Next slide.
And just really quickly, Ms. Ward,
Yes.
To Desiree, apparently, and I don't know exactly what this means, but the public is having trouble joining. So it sounds like Mr. Weddleton might have more details. So if Mr. Weddleton, you can chat with Desiree in the chat box, please. Thanks.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, we're back. So the conditions of the exchange, as in any purchase and sale agreement, there's conditions, things that have to be resolved before it can be completed and the property can be conveyed. So due diligence, we finish all of our due diligence, including our environmental due diligence. Then we will have to approve all of the documents and obtain approval not only from the assembly, but also the nonprofit board and general membership will have to approve the exchange agreement. We will set up the escrow account where funds will be placed after conveyance, after closing, to be used for construction relocation and the trail connections that are going to be needed to be able to connect the new facility to their existing trails. And we'll record the IGP prior to conveyance of that. So phase one is to execute our exchange agreement. We'll perform our due diligence and we'll execute and record the IGP. Then we will execute and record the deeds. In order to allow ASDRA to operate this coming winter in the way that they do today and have for many, many years, we will lease back the Tozier tract to them so that they have time to build their new facility and move into it, and then the lease will terminate. So they will be allowed to stay, and this is a lease at $1 a year to allow them to stay where they are and operate as they normally have. They have to go through a complete conditional use permit process before they start construction of their new facilities. So this is a process that will take probably a year. It might take a little over a year. And then once they move into it, we can go ahead and terminate the lease. Next slide. So this is just a very general concept plan of what their building would look like. Their building is not actually very big. They are replacing their current, what they call clubhouse and starting gate, along with their staging area. Today, they don't have a paved parking lot, but under Title 21, they will be required to have a paved parking lot, complies with not only the use, but also the size of their buildings. So that'll be part of the conditional use permit, is to determine what that looks like. But again, this is a general concept of what their facilities would look like on that lot. Next slide. This shows the connecting trails. They will be connecting with their current trails in Far North Bicentennial Park, and they have to have trails that go out and then trails that come back in. So they have already started work on what the trail connections would look like. So they will have to build the trails on this property to connect with their existing property. And you'll see to the, I'm looking at it to the left, is the Tour of Anchorage Trail that goes through the west side of this parcel. Next slide. Okay, again, we're going to open this up for questions. And if you do have legal questions, I have Bob Owens, who is waiting to answer those. So at this point, Mr. Chair and Assembly people, we will open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Quinn-Davidson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Robin, for this presentation. It's really helpful. Would you mind sending this to us? We've been getting a lot of emails, and it might be nice to have this as a reference when we're composing our responses.
We absolutely will. However, it won't be in PowerPoint because it's a huge file. So we will condense it probably to a PDF and send it out to you. And then you in turn can share that with your constituents.
Great. And then the IGC versus the easement distinction and how it would be converted to an easement if ever conveyed to another party is really helpful. I think that will allay a lot of folks' concerns. So I appreciate you touching on that. Can you, perhaps I just missed it at the beginning, but what are we obtaining the Tozier tract for? What will we be using that for?
We don't know at this point. We don't have any real plans for it. I will tell you that I have been working with the ASDRA board for about 16 or 17 years. They're actually totally surrounded now, especially when we complete the Tudor Elmore development. They will be surrounded by development, and they have barking dogs and so on. They really would like a more permanent home where they can be away from residential and commercial development. So we don't know. this in the 2020 land use plan, at least the north portion that would be closest to Tudor appears to be mixed mixed use development. So it would be residential mixed use, perhaps an R3A. So eventually it would be developed. It is a buffer between the commercial development at Tudor Elmore and the residential development to the west.
Got it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have two questions. First one, because we're on this slide, just out of curiosity, do we know where the Renaissance Fair is going to go? This is the parcel where that is, correct? Or is it the one right next to it?
Through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, this is where the Renaissance Fair is every year. And during the conditional use permit process, I know that ASDRA is going to be asking if they can hold a few nonprofit events like this in their parking lot at the new facility. Right now, this is PLI, and they would be able to perhaps use a portion of their new facility for something like this. Also, with the Tudor Elmore development, we're probably Abate, who performs the motorcycle training, also may lose their opportunity for a site. So they are already talking to ASDRA about the opportunity to maybe use that part-time. So we do believe that, or at least hope that during the conditional use permit, that they will apply for a few nonprofit events like that, because they will have facilities that would be available during the summer when they would not be using it.
Thank you, and thank you for this slide is where I wanted to go next. So thank you for reading my mind. I'm trying to envision the traffic patterns here. So thinking about how I take MLK quite often. Where would folks turn left to get into this property if they were heading east to west, or is there an ability to do that?
There is not, through the chair, Mr. Dunbar, this will be a right in, right out, okay, just as they have today on Tudor, which is also a right in, right out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton?
Mr. Whittleton,
Mr. Whittleton,
you might need to press *6.
Yeah, I'm back. Thanks. There were some people in the public trying to get on, and I guess they can hear now. So at some point, ask for public comment. Well, thanks for this. I think this is a long-known potential thing, and it brings a lot of benefits to everyone, like it's been outlined. I wanted to go through. So looking, I have a kind of a series of questions. Is that okay, Felix?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In the Tudor Road plan, it had kind of different steps that would be done. And one is a site selection study, and then Planning and Zoning Commission site plan review. And then I understand because it's PLI, they'll need a conditional use, which you've referred to. And I wonder, would it go to the Parks and Rec Commission as well?
Through the chair, Mr. Whittleton, it wouldn't be required to go to Parks and Rec. I know that Parks and Rec will be involved in the intergovernmental permit for the tour of Anchorage, but this is actually not park property, it's HLB property. So I don't know that it would. It certainly could if we wanted to. When you, in this circumstance under Title 21, when you have a conditional use permit, you do not have to do a site selection process.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that's helpful then. If I can continue, Felix.
Go ahead.
So in concern with this, I mean, the tour trail is the most obvious critical piece on there. But, this is it's a gorgeous spot. I mean, this is a great place to put this. And I think with allowing other commercial uses, I imagine they'll build a beautiful lodge and it'll be rented out for weddings and other public events and things like that. And I'm really glad you mentioned Abate, because that's another thing. So it's a gorgeous spot, and I'd like to see it maximized. But it's also used not just by tour. I mean, I go up there and run the hill, and I know other people do. There's lots of trails crisscrossing the area that are just hikers and runners, and I think skiers go up there who aren't Tour of Anchorage trail skiers. You also have some squatters up there typically. was there any outreach to them, or is that, is there any hope for some accommodation there with this ASDRA fence the whole area, except for the tour trail? How do you envision this?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, they have talked about a fence. I haven't seen any evidence that they are going to fence the whole entire thing. I know that they're going to fence at least a portion of it because they want to make sure, especially between the staging area and the tour, that you're not mixing different dogs. So I know that at least a portion of it would be fenced. I don't know how much of it will be fenced. Again, that will be determined in the conditional use. They will make proposals on what they'd like to do, and then it'll be up to planning and zoning and frankly, public comment and so on through that process as to how much of it will be fenced and where that fence will go.
Okay, so I guess to summarize, so the conditional use is where kind of the public currently uses it and so on. Is that where they'll have kind of some input, or is things pretty much decided by then?
Through the chair, Mr. Weddleton, the conditional use permit is a very public process through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the public will have ample opportunity to be able to make comments and be involved in that.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Mr. Gates?
Yes, thank you. I want to make sure you can hear me. Okay. I had a few questions, if I may. So the first was the HOB parcel transfer to ASDRA. And I do see that you need the approval of the state first for that transfer because of the deed restriction, but it also requires it, to be for public purposes, recreational uses. So would that mean that after ASDRA owns it, that they can't exclude the public? I guess they could when they have a race, but if they don't have events occurring, then the public is free to use it still, even though owned by ASDRA. And is that their understanding?
Through the chair, I'm not sure that I would interpret it that way. Maybe I will ask Mr. Owens what he thinks. He's the one who's the most past week or so on the deed restriction.
This is Bob Owens. An interesting question. The language in the deed restriction is fairly general, but I would think that there's a possibility, and we should anticipate, unless we put more explicit language into the deed we convey, that the property could be restricted in the future and by the owners. They could fence it, and that, but they would be, their use has to be of a public nature. So it's a good question. I don't know that there's a clear answer, and it's one that we could certainly continue discussions with ASDRA. But for present purposes, the way I read the language in the deed restriction is that it would be public in the ASDRA's use, but I don't know that that necessarily means that they have to allow people to use it year-round all the time.
Thank you, Bob. And I guess, like you said, fencing it for limiting its use. One concern is the trails that go through the parcel now, and I think that some uses might be viewed as compatible with sled dog trails. For example, fat tire bikes, which are very popular now, and I guess used on the snow, they maybe leave some ditching or trenching sort of marks. So I just am concerned that it should be, I guess, the way it is now, open to public use and not allowed to be fenced off. And maybe that would just be limited to the easements that would be in place. Is that kind of what you hint might be the result?
Could you run that by me again?
Yeah, so the easements that will be put in place, or the IGPs, and then eventually easements, those would ensure that the trail usage would still be open to the public, and that Astra wouldn't be able to fence them off or exclude fat tire bikers or joggers, skiers, and so forth.
Yes, that's true. If there are easements reserved in the deed, that's absolutely true.
Thank you. I have another question about the preliminary site plan. So I understand it's preliminary. Eventually, there will be the conditional use permit and a platting action. This would have to be platted, correct, for the egress and access to MLK Boulevard. Is the preliminary site plan already sort of, whoever made it, evaluated that it is most likely to be approved the way it is the way it's been drafted and drawn and what we're seeing now? I guess related to Mr. Dunbar's question about the access only being from a right turn.
Through the chair,
Has to go through a plat approval.
Through the chair, Mr. Gates and other assembly members, they have had a contractor who's been working on this for the past probably 6 months, and they have done a tremendous amount of research. MLK is actually a municipal road, so the traffic engineer has given them the general location, and this works geographically and because of the topo there. They have given them the right for a right in, right out, but there will be no left turn. So no matter where it is located along the south edge of MLK, there will not be a left turn. It is only for right in, right out.
I see. I sort of ask because just down the road is the Tudor Center Drive that T-bones to MLK, and this parcel is across. It seems like it could connect there just from looking at this map. Is it possible the planning board might direct it to be constructed that way instead?
Through the chair, Mr. Gates, there will not be a required platting action for this. The property as it's platted today can be developed, so there won't be any further platting action. The municipal engineering department and the municipal engineer was adamantly opposed to connecting Tudor Center Drive. That was our first request, frankly, to make it a four-way stop so there could be a left turn, and they were adamantly opposed to that and said no.
Thank you. And I wondered what would be, is there some sort of projected timeline for getting the conditional use approval and then eventually having this usable by Astra and the public?
Through the chair, Mr. Gates, they plan, as soon as the deeds have been exchanged, they plan to start the conditional use process. Now that process normally takes from 4 to 6 months. But they're fairly well along on their site plans. They have to do site plans, landscaping plans. There's a lot of work that goes into an application for a conditional use permit, but they're probably halfway towards getting ready to do one. And as soon as they actually get titled, they can go ahead and start that process.
Thank you. I have one more question, if I may.
Go ahead.
So on the other parcel, the Tozier track parcel now on Tudor, the C for this item says that this could be turned to inventory or made part of inventory for mixed use residential properties eventually. So I guess my question is, it's currently PLI, and given the nature of the surrounding properties, is a mixed residential use appropriate? Does that align with the comprehensive and land use plans for the area?
Through the chair, Mr. Gates, yes, the 2020 land use plan as it was updated shows this parcel to be mixed use residential as a buffer between our B3 commercial property that Tudor Elmore was rezoned to the residential on the other side. So mixed residential most likely, and like an R3A would be, and we've met with the planning department. That's what they feel would be most appropriate for them.
Thank you. We will eventually see a rezoning action, right, that would come before the assembly.
Through the chair Gates, that is correct. It will most likely have to be platted and rezoned.
2040. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's all my questions for now.
Thank you. Ms. Solotel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Owens, I have a little bit of confusion about the BLM restriction when we were on that slide and the questions Mr. Gates was asking. My confusion lies, or the concern is that, I guess if they were to choose to fence the property in, how is that reconciled with the deed restriction? Or does it reconcile with the deed restriction if the public is somehow restricted from being able to access the property? And then I have a separate question after that.
Well, I hope you can hear me. I think you've hit upon a really good question, and that is whether there's a total exclusion possible to the public. I most certainly could see that they would want to isolate some areas of it, perhaps either for security purposes or to avoid conflicts with other users. So it's a little hard to say, painting with a broad brush, that the existing restriction means they cannot isolate or secure certain areas. And that leads me to conclude that the opposite may also fit in there. So their general use of the property for recreation and public access seems compatible with this restriction, and even more so if it's not fenced. But I think that's a bit of an open question that we'd want to work out with them.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Is there any way we could prohibit their fencing of the property to keep open access, or to mitigate that possibility or a future dispute?
I think we would have an opportunity to clarify this language in the deeds that we exchange. Whatever language we use will need to be passed by DNR for its approval. But I think we could have an opportunity here to make this a little clearer.
Thank you. And then my other question that's unrelated to that is more for Ms. Ward. A couple of correspondences I've received directly are really concerned that this is potentially opening up larger opportunities to whittle away, that are the words from some of the correspondence, piece by piece, what is really a lovely public resource, the Far North Bicentennial Park, and that so can you talk a little bit about, or talk a little bit to that concern in general, so that I can go talk to my constituents about how either this is isolated or what larger plan I can point to either provide a reassurance or to potentially confirm their concerns?
Through the chair, Ms. Salatel, the concern is all of the properties within Far North Bicentennial Park, and that happens to be a dedicated park. So it is this is an isolated parcel. There are 2 remaining parcels in the tracts that were platted that are undeveloped. This one specifically has to be for recreational purposes. The other one is on the north side of Track 6, and it is right next to the state crime lab. It is about 7, probably, I think, and you can't quite see it in this track, but it's up here next to the crime lab. It's about a 7-acre parcel and that is an undeveloped parcel. Those are the only two isolated parcels that are not dedicated park that we could even contemplate transferring.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. If I saw the mouse move correctly, it's kind of on the back side of the crime lab there. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
between the crime lab and DOT's facility.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Weddleton?
Oh, thanks. Hey, backing up a little bit to the discussion on having some of this land available for broader public use. You know, I mean, it was recognized that the appraised value of this land was exceptionally low because it's an amazing piece of property with great access right in the heart of town. So without that deed restriction, it would be hugely valuable. But with the deed restriction, it's you know, really a great deal for Astra. You know, they get this big area, just gorgeous, but really cheaply. But it comes with that deed restriction, and that deed restriction, I believe, contains some opening, pretty broad, for broader general public use that doesn't conflict with what Astra's needs are now. You know, the dog mushing trails crisscross Bicentennial Park. It's, you know, it's kind of shared by many users, and I think it works fairly well right now. So it's not that any other public use would be, or this parcel would, you know, opposed to what, you know, Astra's goals for dog mushing. So, you know, Bob, I can tell, is leaning towards, they could be able to potentially fence the whole thing, but I think they're getting a bargain on this because they can't do that. They have to have some opening for broader public use. So I guess that's more of a viewpoint, and I'm not a lawyer. Probably no question there.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Mr. Gates?
Yes, thank you. I had a question about the appraised values for the parcels. So the Tozier track parcel is smaller, but clearly 3.4 million value. And the HOB parcel is much larger, but valued much less. So a big disparity in the price per square foot of both PLI properties. So could you just sort of explain the huge difference in the price per square foot values here?
Through the chair, Mr. Gates, and other assembly members, the Tozier tract as it stands today is 9 acres just south of Tudor, surrounded by development on the east and the west, and it is fully developed, or if fully developed, it could be rezoned, and it could be worth considerably more than that. So when an appraiser looks at a piece of property, they also look at the opportunity for rezoning and future development, and that one has no deed restrictions in it and has the potential to be fully developed to a much higher value. Our parcel, however, because of the deed restriction and the necessity to be compatible to the Far North Bicentennial Park, does not have any of those opportunities. It is not a developable parcel except for those uses in the deed restriction. That presents a very substantial devaluation in that parcel. If it were not for that deed restriction, you're absolutely correct. It would be worth more probably than the Tozier tract.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to members of the public. And so what I'm going to do is, I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members here. So I'm going to call phone numbers. And when I get to your phone number and you would like to participate, you need to press *6 to unmute yourself. So 346-1077. Would you like to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the Assembly, my name is Tom Meacham, and I've been associated with the development and protection of Far North Bicentennial Park since about 1976. I think this is an ideal location for the Sled Dog Racing Association to move to. And I guess my concern is how will the public be involved in how they develop their site? And I would assume that would include questions about fencing all or part of the site, unless that is a part of the deed itself. And I think Mr. Weddleton is correct that the value, the lower value for the HLB tract reflects the deed restriction. And if the Sled Dog Association is able to exclude the general public from all of that tract, they will have capitalized on that lower value to an extent that I think is probably not in the public interest. I can see that the Sled Dog Association would want to fence off their developed facilities just to keep people who have no reason to be around their developed facilities to be there. But I think since this tract is twice as large as the Tozier Road, or the Tozier tract on Tudor Road, that they shouldn't expect that they can exclude the general public from normal recreational uses by a perimeter fence or something like that, particularly in the season when they're not actively mushing dogs. One other concern I had is, will there be a deed restriction that prevents the Sled Dog Association from subdividing and selling off part of the tract, the exchange tract that they do not in fact develop? Overall, I think Robin Ward and HLB have done a great job in putting this together, but there are some of these public use and public dedication concerns that still remain. I'm happy to hear that it will go before the Planning and Zoning Commission and a conditional use permit process where the public could be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or response to Mr. Meacham?
Well, this is
Mr.
Bob.
Chair.
You want to go ahead,
okay.
Rob?
Sorry.
With respect to the second point asked about subdividing the property, replatting it, perhaps disposing, any disposition by the Sled Dog Association will require consent in advance. And so there will be some control and ability to restrict that.
Thank you. And then I think there was a second individual who wanted to speak.
Mr. Chair, this is Ms. Zalatel. Are you okay with us asking another question based on what we just heard?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So actually with what Mr. Owens just said, that there would be some additional thing, like what would that be? That seemed like the start of an answer without any kind of specifics. And so I guess I would need a little bit more information about what that kind of assurance would be in terms of being able to sell off parts of this land.
This is Robin Ward, through the chair, Ms. Zalatel. I'm going to start and then I'll let Mr. Owens finish up. It is our intent that we ask for a full transfer from the Department of Natural Resources to allow us to transfer this parcel, and that we hold the MOA as we hold the deed restriction. So if the use is ever violated, the title would revert back to the MOA, or if ASDRA ever in the future wanted to plat, rezone, transfer, they have to have the MOA's authority to do so. So it is our intention to be able to hold the control of that deed restriction.
May I ask a follow-up to that, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. What's the timeline on knowing whether or not the MOA will retain such authority? And where does that fit in all of the different moving parts for this?
To the chair, this is Robin Ward again, Ms. Zalatel, and again, I'll have Bob Owens follow up if needed. As soon as we obtain authority to proceed, we will apply to DNR for authority to transfer and to have the deed restriction revert to us. So that is another process that will go, it'll go simultaneously as we draft all of the documents and look for authority from the boards and so on to proceed. So we will begin that as soon as we have authority to proceed.
And this is Bob again. one other aspect to that is that the restriction in its current form and which would carry forward addresses any transfer of title or control. So it would apply to any lease or any other exchange or situation that the association might attempt to put into place where someone else were to assume control, even in the absence of a formal sale or replat or transfer of title.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead, keep going on members of the public. 602-1667. Oh, sorry, who is that?
Dean Gates.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Mr. Gates.
I just had a short follow-up to what we just heard. Does this mean that, from what you said, that the state DNR would be out of it in terms of needing to approve any other changes or devotion of the uses here? And what we see in front of us, the DNR will be out, and instead it will be the MOA in terms of the grantor be reverted to us if the deed restrictions are not complied with, etc. Is that what you said the plan is?
This is Robin Ward, through the chair, Mr. Gates. That is correct. If you look at the original patent, when the patent transferred to DNR, DNR took over control. So with that certificate of transfer, of authority to transfer, then it reverts to DNR. We would ask for exactly the same thing for the MOA. So when we got authority to transfer with that certificate, then we would be in control of the deed restriction. That will be our request to DNR.
Just one other question to follow up. So is there precedent for that sort of transactions to the MOA for other parcels in the area?
This is Robin Ward, through the chair, Mr. Gates. I'm not sure there's precedent for anything around this one. This is unusual, absolutely. However, if you notice that BLM transferred it to DNR, remember this is a municipal entitlement. We were entitled to have this. I think that will weigh heavily on their decision to allow us to take control of that. But this is the first time that we have requested this type of a transfer with this type of a deed restriction. It's at least in my years here, this is the first time we've requested this.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. So I'm losing members of the public, so hopefully they didn't want to testify. 854-5349, did you want to speak? And if so, star 6. Okay, then 266-696, whatever. I'm getting that wrong, but that last number, if you wanted to speak, star 6. Okay, so I don't have any other members of the public who want to speak. Any other questions from assembly members before we wrap up?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, who's speaking?
This is Dan Rosenberg. I wasn't sure if any of those numbers were mine, but I didn't recognize them.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Yeah, hi, my name is Dan Rosenberg, and thank you for having this work session and allowing the public to ask questions and testify. And thank you for delaying acting on the ordinance until some of these matters can be cleared up and there can be a little bit better understanding of what the final outcome is going to be on this issue. I have no problems with ASDRA being on this site. It's just, as has been mentioned, this is a very unprecedented land transfer, and I'm not convinced that there might not be, whether 5, 10, or 20, or even 30 years down the road, opportunities for more of these beyond the 2 HLB tracks that Robin alluded to. So I feel like we have to do it with care. And I do have some questions. I'm here, I've been involved with Far North Bicentennial Park issues since the early 1980s. And I'm also here, I've been asked to represent the Nordic Ski Association of Anchorage, primarily in regards to the easement. So Tom Meacham has brought up some questions and comments that I will just say I echo. And then from there, I will move on to starting with the trail easement. What concerns me with the trail easement is the uncertainty. It crosses the property, crosses this parcel, and the easement right now implies that it's going to have Astra land on both sides of it, where it's located, but I've never seen it surveyed. I'm not exactly sure how much of this parcel will be to the east, or to the west, I'm sorry, how much will be to the west, because it's over on the west side. And so there's a lot of details with that easement as to the width of it, allowing for vegetated buffers, allowing for human transit of multiple uses, and not having wildlife conflicts, that there's enough room in there if Astra fences it. So, so I haven't seen a survey and would like to know how wide this easement is going to be, what sort of vegetative buffers will be included, or on the other side of the easement on the principal use of the track by Astra. And of course, I think fencing can create a whole lot of problems. It might resolve some problems. I know, I'm sure Astra doesn't want dogs wandering into the middle of their lot, but it also can act as an impediment to free movement of wildlife and cause conflicts with users on the trails. So there's just more I'd like to know about this and how we're going to come to terms with what this easement will look like, sort of the devil's in the details side of it. Another issue that I think has been resolved in this conversation, and I had talked with Ms. Ward about this and appreciated conversing with her on it, but the site plan review is now my understanding that it's been settled that any site plan review will precede any land clearing, any dirt turning on that tract before, even during the leasing or during any process before it gets leased. And I just wanted to clarify that that was correct. The conditional use permit will have to be issued before any work can be done. And the reason I bring this up is because the Assembly Information Memo that was put out on the 14th stated that, and I have it here, I'll just try to read it, stated that Astra will be required to obtain a conditional use permit for the use on a municipal property, which is also zoned PLI, and Astra is fully aware of the requirements prior to completion of construction and commencement of operations. And I'd like to strike prior to completion, but prior to any development, any land clearing and that sort of thing. So has that been fully resolved?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. I guess we'll start with any responses from the administration, and then we'll go to questions from the members.
This is Robin Ward, through the chair. And in response to Mr. Rosenberg's comment, we can certainly make that as a condition that no clearing and grubbing will occur until a full conditional use permit has been issued.
Okay, and I assume that the site review, the site plan, will show what will be cleared, the siting and design of roads, parking lots, fencing, buildings, any utilities, any trails, vegetated buffers, and any fencing. Is that true?
This is Robin Ward again through the chair. Yes, Mr. Rosenberg, that is true.
Okay, thank you. And while I've got you there, can you sort of address my concerns about the easement?
Again, Robin Ward through the chair. Mr. Rosenberg, we haven't even started this process, but we will as soon as we have authority to proceed. The first thing that we will need to do is a LiDAR survey so that we survey the center line, and then we will determine, we'll sit down with Parks and Rec, we'll even probably confer with the Nordic Ski Club to confirm how wide of a buffer do you need for maintenance and for operations, for grooming, that sort of thing. So it should be a collaborative process, and we'll determine what that needs to be before the IGP is actually drafted and recorded.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. And then let me just see if there's anything else that I had in my notes here that I wanted to bring up.
And actually, before you get into that, Mr. Rosenberg, do any Assembly members have questions for Mr. Rosenberg? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So if you can just briefly summarize whatever final points you have, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, well, we talked about restrictions on subdividing the property earlier on, and are there going to be restrictions on leasing the property?
This is Robin Ward through the chair. Mr. Owens did state that any lease would, any transfer of interest, at least as a transfer of interest, would require prior authority. So yes.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that. Have you entertained the idea of the interested parties sitting down and working some of these details out beforehand, and then trying to resolve any issues and then present that to the Assembly?
This is Robin Ward through the chair. I'm not quite sure exactly what you're asking for, to be frank. This ordinance just gives us the authority to go forward. Most of these details will be taken care of in the conditional use permit process, and that is a very public process.
No, I fully understand that. I'm just trying to minimize, or actually probably expedite that process by trying to work out. I don't know what ASDRA has in mind, and it may not be, and everything they have in mind may be very compatible with what we're talking about, what our concerns are about, and very compliant with all of the things that are required in the plan and so on and so forth. But if
Mr.
we
Rosenberg?
could work out, yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask that you, if you and Ms. Ward could please chat offline. It sounds like you two have a lot to talk about.
That'd be great.
Thank you. I don't think we have any other members of the public. Any other final comments from Assembly members before we end? Okay, seeing none. Thank you so much, Ms. Ward, Mr. Owens, Mr. Schutte, and others. I think this is it for today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.